I gotta be honest, it wasn't easy getting here.
7 hours to get to this.
But once you get here,
What pops into your head when you see a danger ahead sign while driving down the road? Naturally, you'd slow down or choose a safer path. But in Mike Rowe's story, there was no flashing warning sign for anyone to notice. Still, the signals were there. At first glance, he seemed like a charming storyteller who could turn almost anything into prime-time entertainment. Yet behind that warm smile and steady voice was a man who questioned traditions, stirred controversy, and sparked debates that still divide audiences today. Stay with us as we uncover who Mike Rowe really is, what the warning signs were, and why so many ignored them. Roots and early path.
After we unload the jellyfish, now we need to separate.
Mike Rowe's story did not begin in studios or on the big screens. It started in March 1962, when he was born into a simple, hard-working family that valued discipline and honesty above everything. With both of his parents being teachers, Mike naturally inherited a respect for education, persistence, and integrity. His younger years were filled with everyday experiences, days at school, quiet evenings with his family, and weekends discovering the world around him. Yet even during those ordinary times, he showed signs of something special, a natural gift for humor, storytelling, and making connections with people. Unlike children who dreamed of becoming famous, Mike was more fascinated with sound, music, and voices. He had an unusually sharp ear, and he could mimic tones and accents almost perfectly. What seemed like a playful habit in his childhood later became one of the key skills in his career. At school in Baltimore, he sang in choirs and joined small stage productions. These moments gave him confidence in front of an audience, something that set him apart from many of his classmates. Without realizing it, he was already preparing himself for what lay ahead. When he entered Towson University, he chose to study communications, a subject that matched his natural abilities. Mike didn't have a clear dream of stardom, but he was pulled toward media, narration, and performance. Alongside his studies, he explored music and theater, strengthening his vocal range and love for voice work. Later, at the Opera Institute in Washington, D.C., he trained seriously and even performed with the Baltimore Opera. Those who knew him then recall how dedicated he was. To Mike, the voice wasn't just sound. It was a form of art, capable of carrying entire stories. Still, his path was not straight. He experimented with different projects, television spots, small commercials, and voiceovers, finding ways to survive while sharpening his talent. For years, his voice was everywhere, but his face remained unknown. His first major break came from an unlikely place, QVC, the home shopping network. On a dare, he auditioned and surprisingly got the job. At first, he treated it as just another paycheck, selling gadgets, jewelry, and electronics late into the night. But what could have been boring turned entertaining because Mike brought his own style. He made people laugh while selling. With his wit, sarcasm, and natural ability to improvise, he could talk endlessly, even about a pencil sharpener, and still keep audiences hooked. QVC wasn't glamorous, but it taught him how to speak naturally on camera and connect with people he had never met. After leaving QVC, Rowe's voice quickly found its place on larger platforms. He became the narrator for programs such as The Most on the History Channel and Deadliest Catch on Discovery. His voice stood out, steady, trustworthy, and personal. Viewers felt as though he was talking to them directly. By the early 2000s, Mike's voice had become recognizable everywhere, even if his face was still not widely known. But he wanted more. He no longer wanted to remain only behind the microphone. He wanted to step into the stories himself. That chance came when Discovery Channel offered him a challenge to join America's workers and try the most difficult, dirtiest, and least appreciated jobs out there. It was risky, but also exciting. For the first time, he would have no script, no safety net, and no way to hide behind narration. It was an opportunity to prove himself not only as a voice, but as someone who could laugh, sweat, and struggle alongside real people. It was a leap that could redefine his career. And with that, the foundation for Dirty Jobs was set. The cameras were ready, the workers were waiting, and Mike Rowe stood on the edge of the project that would forever change his life. How did a man who once sang opera, hosted shopping TV, and narrated other people's stories become the face of a show about America's toughest jobs? That answer began on a farm, in the most unexpected way. The birth of Dirty Jobs.
No, just simply pull it apart, right?
Yes.
So you work your way around it like that, and then it just pops out. It's just impossibly slimy.
Dirty Jobs didn't begin as a carefully polished idea in a boardroom. It began almost by accident. Mike was filming a local segment when he met Gene, a sheep farmer. The plan was simple: capture a routine piece about farming, but it quickly turned into something else. Gene asked Mike to help castrate lambs, and what followed was messy, raw, and unlike anything audiences were used to. Yet it was real and unforgettable. Producer Mary Sullivan saw something in that moment. It wasn't just about farming. It was about showing work as it truly was. Mike had handled the task with humor and respect, and television rarely looked so honest. From that farm, the idea of Dirty Jobs started to grow. Together with Sullivan and Discovery, Rowe shaped the program into a national series. The concept was simple but bold. No scripts, no rehearsals, no clean staging. Just Mike, the job, and the workers. The show's mission went deeper than dirt. While the grime and shock kept people entertained, the real focus was on honoring the men and women whose work built the country. Garbage collectors, miners, sewer inspectors, farmers. These jobs were not glamorous, but they were essential. Through his hands-on approach, Mike proved that dignity existed even in the toughest labor. Dirty Jobs reminded audiences that America was held together not just by leaders or executives, but by everyday workers. Viewers watched Mike crawl through sewers, haul garbage, wrestle animals, and even dive into dangerous waters. These weren't just wild stunts. The heart of the show was Mike's interaction with workers. He laughed with them, struggled alongside them, and showed genuine respect for their craft. Behind the scenes, the team made sure the show stayed authentic. Nothing was staged, nothing polished. What viewers saw was what really happened. That honesty set it apart from other so-called reality programs. Beyond entertainment, the show educated audiences. It opened doors to industries people had never thought about, making viewers realize how much of their daily lives depended on these unseen workers. Of course, not everyone agreed with how the show presented things. Some critics argued it made dangerous labor look too lighthearted, while others felt it ignored deeper issues like pay and safety. But in those early years, excitement drowned out the doubts. For the workers themselves, being featured on the show was validation. It gave them pride to see their efforts recognized on national TV, sometimes for the very first time. Over the years, Dirty Jobs became more than entertainment. It became a conversation about respect, success, and the value of work. It showed that television didn't need glamour to be powerful. It only needed truth. But with truth came debate. And as Mike Rowe's influence grew, so did the controversies. Some saw him as a refreshing voice. Others believed he was pushing boundaries too far. And that set the stage for the next chapter. One filled not with mud and sweat, but with backlash, arguments, and the storm of criticism that would follow him everywhere. Heated debate over education and the skilled trades.
To do the job of sucking out the 8,000 or 9,000 gallons that were in here.
The spark that pushed Mike Rowe from just a TV host into the center of a national debate didn't come from a dirty sewer or a dangerous work site. It came from his voice, while Dirty Jobs showed him shoulder to shoulder with hard-working men and women. It was his off-screen commentary that stirred emotions in a completely different way. Mike began opening up about an issue that touched nearly every American household: the purpose of education, the relentless push toward college, and the forgotten honor of the skilled trades. For years, the message given to young Americans had been almost identical: go to college, get a degree, and success is guaranteed. Parents repeated it endlessly. Schools reinforced it. Politicians sold it as the ultimate path. College became the so-called golden ticket, while careers in mechanics, plumbing, construction, or welding were brushed aside as second-class choices. But Mike questioned that story. He argued that sending everyone to college was not only impractical, but harmful. Why should trades that keep society running be looked down upon? Why should a young person feel embarrassed about choosing a hammer instead of a briefcase? His perspective was simple but bold. He believed the country was suffering from a skills gap. According to him, it wasn't about a lack of jobs. It was about a lack of people trained to actually do them. While millions of graduates left school with crushing debt and degrees that didn't lead to steady work, employers in trades and manufacturing struggled desperately to hire skilled hands. To Rowe, this mismatch was proof of a deeper flaw in the way America valued education. Reactions were divided. Some applauded him, saying he gave voice to frustrations that parents and students were already feeling as they watched young people drowning in debt with few opportunities. Others, however, saw his words as reckless. Did Mike mean college had no value? Was he attacking higher education itself? Critics said he painted the issue too simply, ignoring the real benefits of degrees and casting academia in an unfair light. The argument grew even sharper when Rowe put his words into action. Through his Mike Rowe Works Foundation, he started offering scholarships for students headed to trade schools, future welders, electricians, and auto techs. This was no longer talk, it was a movement. That raised a fresh set of questions. Was he lifting up the trades by tearing down the college path? Or was he simply balancing a system that had leaned too heavily toward one option? His detractors pointed out that many trade jobs came with serious drawbacks: modest pay, physical exhaustion, or high risks. They argued that encouraging young people to enter those fields without fixing the systemic issues could trap them in harsh conditions with little chance for growth. But Mike countered with another point. He said the problem wasn't the work itself, but the stigma surrounding it. Why, he asked, do we glorify white-collar careers while acting like blue-collar ones are something you need to escape? Think about it. When was the last time a school counselor proudly encouraged a teenager to become a welder instead of a lawyer? Why do most career fairs highlight doctors and engineers but almost never mechanics or bricklayers? These were the uncomfortable questions Rowe kept repeating, forcing people to rethink what they valued. At the core of his message was one word: respect. In Mike's eyes, any work done with honesty and skill deserved admiration. The real mistake was believing one path made you better than another. And while many embraced this message, others accused him of building an unnecessary divide. Couldn't society celebrate both? Couldn't doctors and welders both be honored without setting them against each other? The conversation grew even louder as student debt in America hit record highs. Rowe's voice became sharper as he accused the college system of selling false promises. Families who had sacrificed everything for degrees that didn't lead to jobs felt his words deeply. Universities, however, bristled. They argued he was unfairly attacking higher education while offering no real alternatives. Was he a champion for forgotten workers, or simply a critic making noise? What made his argument so powerful was not anger but tone. Mike never shouted. He didn't attack. He asked simple questions in a calm, matter-of-fact way that couldn't easily be dismissed. Each speech, interview, or post poured fuel onto a debate that refused to fade. Because the truth is, Mike Rowe wasn't just talking about work. He was talking about how we measure worth, how we see each other, and how invisible hands keep society running. To some, he was shining a light. To others, he was stirring controversy. And soon, his commentary would move beyond classrooms and job sites. When a pandemic shook the world, when debates about freedom and safety filled the air, Mike Rowe once again spoke up. And this time, the backlash reached a whole new level. COVID-19, politics, and a firestorm of backlash. When the world suddenly came to a halt in early 2020, New voices of authority crowded the stage. Politicians, doctors, scientists, and media all fought to control the narrative of survival. In that confusion, Mike Rowe's words cut through. But now the subject was not about education or trades. It was about how lockdowns and restrictions were crushing ordinary workers. Rowe didn't speak as a scientist or politician. He spoke as a man who had spent years in the company of welders, truckers, and small business owners. He pointed out that the very people who kept America alive were also the ones suffering the most when businesses shut their doors. When restaurants went dark, when factories went silent, when construction stopped, it was those workers who bore the cost. Mike asked the questions many were afraid to ask. How long can people live without a paycheck? How are families supposed to eat when their livelihoods are labeled non-essential? The reaction came fast. Supporters praised him for saying what others only whispered, calling him a voice of reason who stood up for workers ignored by policy. But critics said he was reckless, that his words downplayed the deadly risks of the virus. Was he fighting for jobs while gambling with lives? Or was he simply pointing out truths no one wanted to face? Very quickly, Rowe was pulled into America's political battlefield. He always claimed he didn't belong to either party, but his emphasis on personal responsibility and distrust of government overreach made many label him as conservative. His name began showing up in debates he had never intended to join. Some embraced him as a defender of freedom. Others attacked him as a danger to public safety. A single post questioning sweeping shutdowns could spread online within hours, sparking family arguments at dinner tables and bitter fights on social media. And in the center of that chaos stood Mike Rowe, once known simply as the host willing to crawl through the mud, now painted as a political agitator. The backlash escalated when he warned that closing down industries with no clear timeline could leave scars for years. He spoke about businesses collapsing forever, workers slipping into poverty, and entire towns losing their backbone. To some, he sounded like a realist. To others, it sounded like defiance against science itself. Mike never raised his voice. His tone stayed calm, but every word landed like a stone in a storm. His critics demanded he stay in his lane, remain the funny TV guy in muddy boots. Yet Mike refused to stay silent. He had always dedicated his career to shining light on workers in the shadows, and he wasn't about to stop when those same workers were facing their darkest times. But his choice came at a cost. Many began to wonder if he had crossed a line. Was he still a TV host giving opinions? Or had he become a controversial figure in America's endless cultural battles? That question still hangs in the air, and it set the stage for an even deeper debate about who Mike Rowe really is and what legacy he is leaving behind. Was he speaking truth or just stirring the pot? Mike Rowe's story cannot be told without circling back to one big question that has followed him for years. Was he the rare voice bold enough to say truths others avoided? Or was he simply a troublemaker sparking arguments that left the nation divided? The answer depends entirely on who you ask, and that's exactly why his name refuses to fade from the spotlight. For countless fans, Rowe was a truth-teller. He didn't hide behind polished lectures or fancy theories. He saw life the way ordinary folks lived it and spoke plainly. When he highlighted the dignity of work, families across the country nodded in agreement. When he warned that America's obsession with college degrees left trades ignored, thousands of young workers felt recognized. And when he pointed out that the shutdowns of COVID-19 crushed small businesses harder than anyone wanted to admit, struggling owners felt he was the only one voicing their pain. To them, Rowe's honesty was refreshing. He wasn't chasing applause, he was chasing reality. But truth isn't always comfortable, and that's where the troublemaker label crept in. Critics claimed he reduced complex issues into sound bites. Was the college system broken? Perhaps, but did that mean it should be written off? Was government overreach real during the pandemic? Maybe, but did that mean safety should be ignored? To his detractors, Rowe was careless. They believed his influence carried weight, and with that weight came responsibility. To them, he stirred outrage instead of offering balance. Much of the debate came down to intent. Did Mike deliberately seek controversy, or did controversy chase after him? Watching him on screen, many believed he never hunted conflict. His calm delivery and reflective style suggested he wanted people to think, not fight. Yet once his words reached the public, they traveled into a world hungry for arguments. A single comment could turn into a headline, and suddenly Mike Rowe was framed as either a champion of the working class or an enemy of modern progress. What sharpens the question further is Rowe's own reaction. He often chuckled at being seen as either a savior or a villain. In his eyes, he was just a guy asking questions. But isn't asking the right questions sometimes the harshest truth of all? And if those questions disrupt the peace, does that automatically make the one who asked them a troublemaker? In the end, Mike walked a razor-thin line that few dared to step on. He spoke words that inspired many and provoked reactions that divided others. Whether he was a truth-teller or a troublemaker remains a debate without a neat conclusion, one that still keeps his name alive in conversations today. And as that debate continues, another chapter unfolds, one that asks not who he was, but who Mike Rowe is right now. What's new with Mike Rowe? These days, Mike Rowe is still firmly in the spotlight, though not always in the flashy reality TV way that first made him famous. He has carefully preserved his voice, his advocacy, and his influence. His podcast, The Way I Heard It with Mike Rowe, continues to run strong, delivering short, compelling stories that surprise, inspire, and often challenge the way people think about history and culture. His unmistakable voice hasn't disappeared either. Rowe continues narrating hit documentary series like Deadliest Catch and How the Universe Works, keeping that familiar tone alive in millions of households. But narration is just one part of who he is today. His Mike Rowe Works Foundation has grown into a powerful force in promoting skilled trades. Through scholarships, school visits, and campaigns, he has encouraged young people to look beyond the traditional college path. He frames this not as dismissing higher education, but as reminding society that welding, plumbing, and construction are just as vital as any office career. In recent years, his advocacy on this subject has become even louder. On the personal side, Mike Rowe remains an intensely private man. Despite constant speculation, he has never been married and has no children. He has openly admitted that family life wasn't a road he felt called to take. Instead, he leads a quieter life in Belvedere, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. To many, this may seem unusual for a public figure, but for Rowe, it fits perfectly. He maintains a close relationship with his parents, particularly his mother, Peggy Rowe. Her witty posts and humorous reflections have earned her an online following of her own, and Mike often shares her work proudly, highlighting the joy she brings to others. Publicly, Rowe still appears in interviews and events, repeating his message of valuing work, responsibility, and practical skills. On social media, he engages directly with fans, pushes back at critics, and keeps the same easygoing, thoughtful style that people have come to expect. Though he no longer dominates TV screens like he did with Dirty Jobs, his influence has shifted into something steadier and more lasting. Instead of relying on spectacle, he's built a reputation of consistency, and that may be the ultimate takeaway. Mike Rowe isn't the celebrity you'll find splashed across gossip columns or glossy covers, but his ideas, his voice, and his steady persistence are quietly shaping conversations that truly matter. Now it's your turn. What's your take on Mike Rowe? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If this video brought you value, don't forget to hit like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories just like this. We'll be back again soon with another exciting video. Until then, take care and goodbye.